In September 1997, in Albany, New York, a discovery was made. What appeared to be discarded trash held something far more devastating. Inside was the body of a newborn infant, a discovery that immediately launched one of the region's most haunting investigations. On the morning of September 7, 1997, workers maintaining the grounds of Washington Park in Albany, New York, made a chilling discovery. While digging an irrigation line near a flower bed close to the park's Moses Monument, one of the city park employees noticed a blue pillowcase or laundry bag that looked out of place. The bag was partially burned at one end, and a scattering of spent wooden matches lay on top of it, immediately raising questions about its contents. Initially assuming it might be harmless trash, a worker used a shovel to gently nudge the bag. To his shock, when the bag shifted, the body of an infant tumbled out. The baby was lying face down on the ground within the flower bed. The unexpected discovery triggered an immediate and intense law enforcement response as the police scrambled to determine how the baby ended up there, who the parents might be, and the circumstances surrounding its demise. The investigators quickly noted that the infant's umbilical cord was still attached, indicating that the baby had been born very recently. The partially burned wrapping around the baby, combined with scorch marks on the back, head, and neck, suggested someone had attempted to burn either the corpse or the wrapping, possibly in an effort to destroy evidence. The scene pointed to an alarming and deliberate act rather than a natural or accidental occurrence. Medical examiners confirmed that the baby had been born alive and appeared healthy at birth. They estimated that the infant was likely less than 12 hours old at the time of demise. There were no visible signs of external trauma or illness, leading the authorities to conclude that suffocation or smothering, rather than natural causes, was the probable cause of how the baby lost their life. In the days that followed, the Albany police officers and the detectives conducted extensive investigative efforts. They canvassed the surrounding neighborhood, sought tips from the public, and carefully examined trash receptacles for potential evidence. In addition, they contacted schools, colleges, hospitals, and other facilities to see if any expectant mothers had recently received treatment, gone missing, or otherwise raised suspicion. But these efforts initially produced few leads. Despite the intensive investigation, days turned into months with little progress. The identity of the infant and the circumstances of his end remained unknown, leaving the case unresolved. Eventually, the baby was buried under a headstone in Washington Park, given the name Moses Washington, a somber reminder of the tragedy and the unanswered questions surrounding it. After more than 2 decades, the baby Moses investigation took a significant turn in the fall of 2020, during a period when COVID-19 disruptions kept many New Yorkers at home, and the investigators resumed reviewing long-dormant cases. Improvements in DNA technology offered new hope, prompting the authorities to re-examine preserved evidence that had never yielded results in the 1990s. By 2022, forensic specialists succeeded in extracting a viable DNA profile from the materials collected decades earlier. In August 2022, an analysis conducted by the FBI uncovered the first major breakthrough in the case. The infant's DNA was connected to a relative found in a genetic database, though it remained unclear whether that relative's information had entered the system through a criminal process or through a genealogy service later shared with law enforcement. Regardless of its origin, the match finally provided the investigators with a tangible direction after years of uncertainty. Following this lead, the police concentrated on a family with ties to Roxbury, a rural area in Delaware County, located about 70 miles from Albany. The investigators cross-referenced multiple databases in search of potential connections, focusing specifically on women who would have been capable of giving birth in 1997 and who might have been present in the Albany region. Their attention quickly narrowed to Carrie S. Mazuka, a 52-year-old woman from Guilderland who was divorced and had 2 children. Mazuka, born in 1972, spent her early years in Roxbury, a small town in Delaware County, New York. During her teen years, Mazuka attended high school in Delaware County. After finishing high school, Mazuka continued her education at SUNY Delhi. By the mid-1990s, Mazuka made a significant change when she moved to the Albany area. At some point in her adulthood, Mazuka married and later went through a divorce. Through that relationship, she became a mother of 2 children. To confirm their suspicions, the detectives collected discarded items from outside Mazuka's residence and tested them for DNA comparison. The results matched the biological profile of the infant found in Washington Park, identifying her as the child's mother. With this confirmation, the authorities arrested Mazuka in September 2024, bringing an end to 27 years of unanswered questions surrounding the case. During a police interrogation, Mazuka calmly confessed to suffocating her newborn son shortly after birth and attempting to burn the body. The biological father was also identified and questioned, but he had no knowledge of the pregnancy and was cleared of any wrongdoing. In February 2025, Mazuka entered a guilty plea. At the time of the baby's demise, she had been 25 years old, and her conviction included a concurrent charge related to tampering with evidence. During her sentencing on April 18, 2025, in Albany County Court, she expressed remorse, acknowledging the severity of what she had done and stating that she lived with lasting regret. She also described herself as having otherwise lived responsibly and asked the court to consider leniency. She said, "I am sorry, I did a horrible, unimaginable thing, and I live with remorse and regret. I am a great mom. I have lived a law-abiding life, and I do deserve a lengthy sentence. I just hope you use some discretion and go to the lower end." Mazuka and her defense attorney, Andrew Safranco, were asking for the judge to set a reduced sentence between 22 to 25 years. Safranco said, "Did she commit a terrible act? Absolutely. Does she deserve to be punished? 1000%. But there is no question that she has an otherwise zero criminal history and lived a law-abiding life." Deputy Chief Albany County Assistant District Attorney Jessica Blaine Lewis argued that Mazuka is already facing a reduced sentence, and while she has admitted to ending the life of the infant, she takes little to no responsibility. Mazuka told the detectives that she did not have another option. She says she was unaware that she was pregnant at the time. She was then sentenced to 25 years in state prison. A detective involved in the long investigation reflected on the outcome, noting that cases like these never truly fade for those who work on them. Police Chief Brendan Cox said, "While this is special because a child was involved, because a baby was involved, there is no case that we forget. We talk about cold cases. It is not the cold cases. It is the fact that any case to us is real, it is alive, and we try to carry on and make sure that we bring justice to victims, that we keep those cases alive, that we want closure for people." Mazuka's sentence will be followed by 5 years post-release supervision. In September 1984, a motorist traveling along Interstate 93 in New Hampshire made a discovery that would reopen a mystery. For years, the investigation stalled, until a witness came forward decades later. Brian Watson entered the world in 1961, growing up in South Boston, Massachusetts. 23-year-old Brian's absence did not go unnoticed. His mother became increasingly worried when he failed to return home or reach out to anyone in the family for several days. The silence was unusual for him, and her concern grew as each day passed without any sign of where he might be or who he had been with before he disappeared. Unable to ignore her fear, his mother took action and filed a missing persons report. The report was officially documented on July 28, 1984, which was roughly 11 to 12 days after Brian was last seen. This step marked the beginning of a formal effort to understand why he had vanished and whether his disappearance signaled something more troubling. Once the report was filed, the police authorities initiated their investigation to determine what had happened to Brian. Although the case was classified as a missing adult situation, the unexplained circumstances surrounding his disappearance raised early concerns. The lack of communication and the sudden break in routine suggested that the case might involve potential foul play. The investigators began by reviewing the details provided by Brian's family, hoping to identify any direction the inquiry could take. They gathered what limited information was available, focusing on the last known sightings and any patterns in his recent behavior. With no clear explanation for his absence, each small lead became important. The police also looked into Brian's known associates, speaking with individuals who had interacted with him before he went missing. They checked the places he was known to frequent in South Boston, hoping someone might recall seeing him during the days leading up to his disappearance. These familiar locations were the initial foundation of the investigation. 2 months after he went missing, on September 16th, events took a significant turn when a motorist traveling along Interstate 93 South, near Manchester, New Hampshire, came across something unusual off the roadway. About 40 feet from the road, the driver discovered a body. The scene prompted immediate contact with the authorities, who began the process of determining the person's identity and the circumstances surrounding the discovery. When the officials examined the remains, they moved carefully to confirm who the individual was. Dental records were used to make a positive identification, and the results revealed that the body belonged to Brian Watson. This confirmation not only brought the missing person phase to an end, but also shifted the focus of the case entirely, as the investigators now faced a crime that required further explanation. The medical examiner later ruled that Brian had been shot. Although details about the event were not publicly disclosed, the ruling indicated that his demise had been caused by a deliberate act. This finding raised new questions about how Brian ended up in New Hampshire and who was responsible. In response to the ruling, a joint investigation was launched. Multiple agencies became involved, including the New Hampshire State Police, Manchester Police Department, Boston Police Department, and the federal authorities. Their collaboration reflected the seriousness of the case and the complexity of tracking down answers that crossed state lines and involved several jurisdictions. Over the years, the investigators continued reviewing evidence, interviewing potential witnesses, and searching for any detail that could reveal what had happened to Brian. The work stretched on for an extended period, showing how determined authorities were to understand the sequence of events that led to his end. Even as time passed, the case remained active and unresolved. After 2.5 decades went by, around 2009, the investigators developed a significant break that appeared promising. Although this development suggested progress, the information gathered was not strong enough to indict any individual. The lead, while important, did not meet the level required to formally charge a perpetrator, leaving the case still without a clear conclusion, and the search for answers ongoing. The case eventually developed a clearer direction when the investigators linked the case to a dispute involving illegal substances connected to Whitey Bulger. Within that context, the authorities determined that Michael Lewis and another individual had been responsible for disposing of Brian's body. This connection shifted the focus of the long-running inquiry and provided the investigators with a more defined path to follow. In later years, a person referred to by the prosecutors as Witness 2 came forward with new information. According to this witness, Lewis had spoken of carrying out the act several times. Although the statements alone were not enough to build a full case, they offered a lead the investigators had not previously been able to confirm and prompted further examination of the surrounding evidence. The authorities worked to corroborate the witness's account with additional material gathered over the years. Their review supported the claim, strengthening the foundation of the case and giving the investigators enough confidence to move toward formal legal action. This verification played a key role in advancing a case that had stalled for almost 4 decades. On May 27, 2022, a grand jury returned a first-degree slaying indictment against Michael Lewis, who was then 61 and still associated with South Boston. The charges specified that he was responsible for taking Brian's life. On or about July 16th or 17th of 1984, Lewis and another man, both of whom were involved in the South Boston substance trade, were driving in South Boston in search of another substance dealer. Their purpose was to stop that dealer from operating in South Boston. While looking for the dealer, Lewis and the second man encountered Brian Watson. The second man asked Brian to lead them to the dealer. Brian agreed. He entered the vehicle and sat in the back seat. While the 3 men drove around South Boston, Lewis suddenly turned, shot, and ended Brian's life. The 2 then drove into New Hampshire and dumped Brian's body off I-93 South in Manchester. In 2025, Lewis later entered the court process. During victim impact statements, Brian's family described a loving father, brother, and fiancé, and a life of unrealized promise. His fiancé said, "We were both young, full of plans, full of love, and full of hope, full of the life we would live together. All of that was stolen on the night Brian's life was ended." Jacqueline Carter, Brian's oldest sister, said, "The loss of Brian has haunted our family for the past 41 years, leaving profound pain that echoes through our lives." Jessica Prioli, Brian's daughter, said, "While you lived your life freely for years, we lived with the emptiness you created. We carried the weight of what you did." On November 5th, 2025, he pleaded guilty, not to first-degree slaying, but to 2 counts of manslaughter. One count addressed the 1984 case involving Brian, and the second count concerned a separate 1993 case. He was already in jail for the 1993 case when he was charged with Brian's case. Lewis took the life of 46-year-old William Villani in William's office at 2 Sterling Square in South Boston. Lewis worked for William at the Boston Housing Authority Pest Control Unit. William went to his office on April 16, 1993, and his body was found the following day. He had been beaten, stabbed, and shot. Lewis was upset at William because he forced Lewis to come back to work after a lengthy excused absence. This shift in charges reflected the legal conclusion reached through negotiations and available evidence. With Lewis's plea, the 1984 cold case involving Brian was officially considered closed. Lewis was sentenced to 2 15-year prison sentences to be served concurrently at the Sousa Baranovsky Correctional Center. The authorities stated that the resolution brought the family closer to a sense of justice and closure after decades of unanswered questions. Attorney General Formella said, "This resolution stands as a testament to the determination of investigators who refuse to let time stand in the way of justice." Nearly 40 years after Brian Watson was slain, his family can finally have some measure of closure. We are deeply grateful to our partners in Massachusetts and New Hampshire who never stopped working toward this outcome. Although the case had taken many years to reach this point, the final outcome provided a measure of resolution for those connected to the investigation. In October 2016, an 18-year-old man left his Cotati, California home, but did not return. The case, marked by persistence and community support, revealed how a young man's life was cut short by someone he once knew, leaving behind questions of betrayal and a community forever scarred by the loss. Kirk Ryan Kimberly was born in Santa Rosa in 1998, a child who quickly became the center of his parents' world. At 18 years old, Kirk was living in Cotati, California. He had recently reached a milestone that marked the beginning of his journey into adulthood, his graduation from Rancho Cotati High School in 2016. Outside of school and family life, Kirk found passion in sports and activities that demanded both skill and discipline. He practiced jiu-jitsu. Kirk's adventurous spirit extended beyond martial arts. He was an avid dirt bike rider and racer, often spending weekends camping and riding with his family. Another part of Kirk's adventurous life came from the water. With his mother being a scuba instructor, Kirk developed a passion for scuba diving. His next step was to begin working at a machine shop in Rohnert Park. What he did not know was that while he was planning for tomorrow, a danger awaited him that would change everything. On October 17, 2016, Kirk left his home in Cotati riding his white Cannondale mountain bike. His plan was simple. He was on his way to meet a friend. It was a normal day, and nothing about his departure suggested what was about to unfold. But when Kirk did not return home that evening, his absence quickly became a source of deep concern for his family. 2 days later, with no word from Kirk, his father filed a missing persons report. The waiting and uncertainty weighed heavily on the family, while the police authorities began their work to trace his whereabouts. The investigators sought to uncover where Kirk had gone and what had happened to him in those missing hours. The questions surrounding his disappearance only grew as each day passed without answers. The police authorities pressed forward with their investigation, following every possible lead. Search efforts were carried out with determination, as law enforcement worked to piece together Kirk's last known movements. His family and friends held on to hope during those weeks, clinging to the possibility that he might still be found safe. But as time moved on, the silence became more alarming. The following month, on November 2nd, a landscaper working at Sonoma State University made a chilling discovery. While removing brush about 200 yards from a campus parking lot, he came across Kirk's body. The site was a wooded area known as the Badlands, located west of the Green Music Center. Although Kirk had no ties to the university, his life ended there, in a shallow grave hidden away from sight. The location itself raised troubling questions for the investigators. The autopsy conducted by a forensic pathologist revealed that Kirk had passed away from multiple stab wounds. The brutal nature of his demise left no doubt that he had been the victim of a violent crime. For his loved ones, the findings confirmed their worst fears, and for the investigators, the task ahead became even more pressing, uncovering who was responsible and why Kirk's life had been taken. The case did not fade away, though answers were slow to come. For several years, it remained active, yet unresolved. The authorities continued their pursuit of justice, reminding the public that the case was not cold. As the police authorities continued their investigation, they determined early on that Kirk's demise was not the result of a random act of violence. Instead, the crime was considered targeted. With this understanding, the detectives cast a wide net in the search for answers, interviewing over 100 people during the initial stages of the investigation. Each interview was an attempt to uncover the truth and identify those connected to the crime. The community, grieving alongside Kirk's family, sought ways to support the search for justice. Together, they raised a reward exceeding $12,500, intended to encourage anyone with information to come forward. This collective effort demonstrated the determination of both loved ones and neighbors to find closure and hold the person responsible accountable. From the beginning, the detectives had focused on Daniel Carrillo, a former high school classmate of Kirk's. Carrillo quickly emerged as a primary suspect after the investigators obtained cell phone GPS data. The data placed him at the Sonoma State University campus on October 17, 2016, at the very time Kirk's life was ended. This crucial piece of evidence guided the direction of the case, strengthening suspicions against him. On February 28, 2020, Carrillo, then 20 years old, was arrested in connection to the case. At the time, he was being transferred from a youth facility, which allowed the authorities to move forward with the arrest. The GPS records, placing him directly at the crime scene, served as the cornerstone of the charges against him. After years of waiting, the investigators and Kirk's family finally saw movement toward justice. Carrillo was initially brought to trial, but it was during a retrial in February 2025 that he was ultimately convicted of first-degree slaying. The mistrial was due to Serological Research Institute, a Richmond-based lab that had been found to have flawed DNA analysis that affected hundreds of cases statewide. The conviction came nearly 9 years after Kirk's demise, marking a significant moment in a case that had remained unresolved for so long. The verdict brought answers, though it could never erase the pain of the loss. Kirk's parents, Kelly and Jennifer, sat in the courtroom, surrounded by friends and family, as the verdict was read before Judge Vernon Nakahara in Sonoma County Superior Court. Kelly held his wife's hands and shut his eyes as the decision was announced. In that moment, he said, his mind was on his wife and the toll the case had taken on their lives. He said, "We have had our whole life on hold for 8 years. This crime literally caused me to have open-heart surgery." In June 2025, Carrillo was formally sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. This decision ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Despite their relief at the verdict, Kelly said that he and his wife empathize with Carrillo's family and understand they too have suffered a loss. He said, "We are certainly not happy, but we are relieved." Reflecting on the long investigation, Sonoma County Sheriff's authorities commented, "For the past 3 years, violent crime detectives have been conducting follow-up interviews and reviewing physical and forensic evidence." Their words underscored the persistence that had carried the case forward and ultimately delivered justice for Kirk Kimberly,